G'day again guys, and welcome back to my new video. So, this piece was supposed to be a quickie. That didn't end up happening. My intention with this piece was going to be just to get my feet wet back into doing art again. It was going to be a really quick piece, not an overly complicated image, just something I picked up off wildlife reference pictures. I wasn't going to change too much, and I was just going to use some pastel matte. Nice quick pan pastel base. It was going to be super quick. Well, yeah. So my first problem was that I had run out of pastel matte paper, and nowhere in my area sells it just straight off the shelf. I was going to have to order it in, and it's really expensive, and I can't really just order one sheet, so I was going to have to buy a booklet. Yeah, whole thing. Didn't want to have to place an order just to get started on this one piece. So I dug through my drawers, and I went through some of my old pieces of paper in my stash, and I pulled out a piece of the, this is the Canson Metience Tex, I believe they call it Touch in the States. Very similar textured surface. Wasn't going to be messing around with it too much. I thought that's going to be a quickie, it doesn't really matter. So I taped everything up on the edges and I drew out my piece, pretty simple. And I got to work with the pan pastels. It was really fun. I used some really nice brown tones here. I really liked the way it was coming together, and I just thought this was going to be a really nice effect. So I built up my couple of layers, kind of put a little hint of a bit of barnyard texture in the background, not too much, and yeah, I got started. I was really happy with how this was going. With that background in place that I was really happy with, I started to work on the owl himself, and this happened. So working on this owl, and there is a big fault. There's something that's gotten onto that paper and the pencil just doesn't want to stick there. It'll probably build up over the top, but I'm not that far into the piece. So it's probably better to start again on a piece of paper that doesn't have whatever that is, sort of some kind of oil, or I don't know what's caused that. There's another blob there you can see, where it's just not. Oh man, start again. Oh man, listening back to myself editing that, I sound so bummed. And I really was. I had gotten myself excited to be back at the table, and this one had just blown up in my face, and really, it took the wind out of my sails. So I just kind of sat on it for a couple of days. I didn't get back to work straight away. I was like, oh man. And somewhere in that couple of days, I just went, you know what? If I'm going to be fighting this one, I may as well give it a shot painting it. I've got a canvas that's a similar size here. Just have to redraw my owl up just that little bit bigger. And yeah, let's pull out the acrylics. If I'm going to be pushing shit uphill, I may as well, you know, make a thing of it. So I pulled out the acrylics and I got started. I knew I was making things hard for myself. I have only made very few acrylic paintings in my time. I think I've got one that I've have up on my channel of a little frog that I did, and really that is the extent of my acrylic painting experience, bar a few just slapping things around. I am not good at it. I don't know how the textures work. I don't really know how to use my brushes, so everything that I did in this piece was going to be a big fat experiment. The one thing that I really learnt while painting that frog was that acrylics are pretty forgiving of a medium, really. As long as I don't put down too thick of a layer of paint, I can pretty much go back over and over again trying to get the textures that I like. So I wasn't feeling too worried about getting the effect that I liked, but it was a matter of how long it was going to take me to get there, and that kind of proved to be a hurdle. My first protocol was to make sure I got down the base layers. So I worked on the background. I was using that rejected piece to the side of me to try and get the colors that I like, because I really like the color of the background. So I was working to sort of match that, and then I got down the base tones of the owl. It's a very, very dramatically shadowed reference picture, so it kind of took me a little bit of time to get my head around that. But my first thing was just to get that base layer down and then see where I went from there. One thing that I did do to simplify things an awful lot for myself was to just maintain a very, very limited color palette. I kept everything really just to those plain earth tones: burnt umber, raw umber, burnt sienna, yellow ochre, black and white. Touched a little bit of blue in the shine of his eyes, a little bit of pink on his beak, but other than that, the yellow ochre and the burnt sienna added all of the orange tones that I needed, and everything else I just kept to those really, really base, just really working more on making sure I had the right light and darkness to the piece, and I didn't have to fight looking for the right color a lot. The other thing that I did was to make up a little wet palette for myself. Yeah, it meant that I didn't have to keep mixing colours. It's just a Tupperware container with some sponges on the bottom and a piece of, what do you call it, wax paper over the top, and that just maintains the moisture in the paint. It meant that as I went back to it day after day after day after day after day, I didn't have to keep mixing my colours again. They were all nice and fresh. And the Atelier interactive paint is really, really good for that. It's really easy to just activate again if it goes a little bit dry, and in the wet palette didn't really go dry either. So that just simplified the whole procedure so much. The other thing I did to really simplify this for myself was I kind of broke him up into sections, just so mentally I wasn't so overwhelmed trying to get the whole thing done. I had my base layers down, so I had a bit of coverage over the canvas. I was feeling okay about that. And then I broke him up into little sections. So first off, I worked on his face and then really just tried to get the shadows right in that. And I got it to about 95% of what I wanted him to be. And then I moved on to the textures on the top of his head, all of that really mottled sort of stuff. Then I worked on the feathers framing his face, then onto his neck, and then onto his body. There was a lot of experimentation in getting these textures down. I am not that experienced with these paints, so I'm not really sure what my brushes can do and what textures I need the paint to be, how thick I need it, how thin I need it. So every single one of these layers I really just pulled apart, tried layer after layer until they looked the way I liked. I got them to about 95% before I moved on, because there's always glazing and things that can be done later to make it more cohesive. But I found that breaking it up into these little sections and then just trying to work on one texture at a time just really just simplified it and just took a little bit of the, you know, the frightening element of trying to get the whole painting done. I'm really not sure how many different settings it took for me to actually get this done. I certainly didn't record every single paint stroke here, because sometimes I would just sit down at the desk, open up the tub of paint, stick down a couple more blobs, see if something worked. Yeah, no, let that dry, and then I would come back and try another technique or another brush or drier or thicker or wetter paint. Just throwing stuff to see what sticks, really. And after many, many days and many, many sittings and staring at it and looking at it and going back and trying again, I actually came to a place where I really liked the way the owl looked. Pretty stoked. Only problem was, to really finish the piece, he had to be sitting in something. He had to be sitting in some straw, and I really had no idea how to approach this. So happy with the way the owl looked, I really didn't want to mess with it. So this is where the Atelier interactive paint came in super, super handy, because it has a save feature. If you use the universal medium varnish that they have, you can actually put a layer of that varnish over your paint, and it's like hitting the save button. So when I came to adding the straw in textures that I wasn't really sure was going to work, I knew I could just get a wet cloth and rub off anything that I wanted. And this just gave me such a sense of peace of mind, knowing that what I had was going to stay. No matter what I threw on it now, I wasn't going to wreck it. And yeah, all good. I had no idea how I was going to approach doing this straw. It's not a texture that I've ever painted before, and I didn't know what brush to use, so I was really like, I was trying to follow some of the textures that I saw in the reference photo, but yeah, I wasn't really sure. I practiced on a couple of different pieces of paper, but yeah, I didn't really like the textures that I was getting, so I just went onto the piece and I went, okay, layer some stuff up, give it a go. And the first time I hated it. It was just too thick and blobby. I'd gone too far up. So I got that cloth out. Second attempt ended much the same way. Just, I wasn't feeling it. It didn't look right. It was just, I don't know. Look, looking back, I probably just could have worked on it till I got to the right thing, but I was nervous and it wasn't feeling right, and I knew I could get rid of it, so I did. And so, after about 45 minutes of struggling trying to get this one in, same thing, wiped it off with the cloth, gone. On my third and final attempt, I put down a little bit of a dry brush texture first, so it wasn't just a bunch of lines being put on the page, so there was a bit of texture underneath the lines that I was putting down, and that really, really did help. It just filled it all out without me feeling like I had to put down 1001 squiggly lines. I also started to get a little bit of a handle of the technique to use with the liner brush, where I was kind of rolling and moving the paintbrush in a different way to try and get a more stick-like texture, and I was much more happy with the way that this set of nest was coming down. So I just kept working on it, layer and layer and layer and layer. It was a little bit of a fight, and this part literally took days, where I just kept going back to it and going back to it. I had it up on my easel and I'd take a look at it from a distance and go, no, I need a little bit more light there, or I need a little bit more dark there, and just going backwards and forwards until I finally decided that I was okay with how it looked. So here's the final piece, and considering this was supposed to be a very, very quick drawing that turned into a month-long saga of me going backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards, I actually really like the result. I've still got a long way to go before I'm feeling anywhere near confident with my acrylic paints, but I do feel a little bit better after this one, and I'm quite proud of how it turned out. So I hope you've enjoyed this. I've just received a fun little package in the mail, so I'm going to be playing with that in my next video. But for now, you can do all those fun YouTubey things, the like and subscribe, ring the bell, all the things they tell you to do. I really do appreciate that. And I'll see you guys again real soon. Bye, guys.